episode 82. Today's Thursday, January 3rd, 2013. And I am your host, Christina Consolo. And Jules and Kurt will be hanging out in the background. And I wanted to thank everybody for all the emails that I've been getting. I really missed being here for the last 2 weeks, but I had kind of a health emergency that came up. I had another abscess, and I woke up on Monday morning 2 weeks ago with this burning pain in my leg, and over just a few hours it grew to like this golf ball sized thing, which needed emergency surgery to drain. And thank God it was in my leg and it wasn't like in my brain or my intestines or something. But this is the third one that I've had in like a month and a half. So because I didn't have insurance, I had to have the surgery in the emergency room. And the doctor said, usually for ones this big, we go to the OR, but we'll try to do this one here. And it was the most painful, agonizing thing that I've ever experienced. I felt like traumatized afterward, and like my brain wasn't working right for like a whole week. And it might have been because they gave me Dilaudid. Jules, have you ever had Dilaudid?
I have not, no.
It's really weird. Like as soon as they give it to you, you feel like your head gets really heavy. Like your brain feels funny, and I couldn't think straight for like a whole week. I was really out of it. And so like 5 days later, I saw my doctor, because they don't sew these things closed. Like once they drain it, they leave it open. I know that's really gross, but that's what they do. And they don't like stitch it shut or anything, and you have to like put this shoelace stuff in it, like gauze. And it's really gross. And anyway, when I saw my doctor a few days later, he was just horrified that they didn't put me on antibiotics afterward. And, I'd ask them at the hospital, don't I need antibiotics now in case it's like in my bloodstream? And they're like, oh, unless you get another one, you don't need it. And I'm like, but this is my third one that I've had. And so anyway, my thyroid problems have kind of got put on the back burner while I've been dealing with this, but I got my results from that, and the ultrasound was within normal limits, but the blood work was completely whacked. The thyroid numbers are all high for the autoimmune system, indicating possible Hashimoto's syndrome. And if you guys don't know what that is, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is often linked with hypothyroidism and bouts of hyperthyroidism. Symptoms of it include psychosis, weight gain, depression, mania, sensitivity to hot and cold, paresthesia, fatigue, panic attacks, bradycardia, tachycardia, high cholesterol, reactive blood sugar problems, constipation, migraines, muscle weakness, cramps, memory loss, infertility, and hair loss. I mean, no wonder I feel like crap. It says the thyroid gland may become firm, large, and lobulated, although mine doesn't seem to be doing that yet, but changes in the thyroid can also be non-visual. Enlargement is due to lymphocytic infiltration and fibrosis rather than tissue hypertrophy. Physiologically, antibodies against thyroid peroxidase, TPO, and/or thyroid globulin cause gradual destruction of follicles in the thyroid gland. Accordingly, the disease can be detected clinically by looking for these antibodies in the blood. It's also characterized by invasion of the thyroid tissues by leukocytes, mainly T lymphocytes, and it is associated with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And we've barely touched on this with my doctor because we've been dealing with this other problem, so I've got to see him again in 10 days. But Jules and I were talking about our thyroids before the show today, and she had kind of an interesting story that she shared with me. You had kind of similar problems, which you didn't find out till much, much later where it came from.
Yeah, back in the late 90s, in the beginning of the 2000s, I had some weird stuff start happening. The way I discovered it was I was finding like these $50 sized bald spots on my head where my scalp was like completely smooth. And I freaked out, of course, and went to my doctor, and they discovered that it was autoimmune. It was my immune system that was attacking my hair follicles and causing my body to have autoimmune alopecia areata. And shortly thereafter, I started to have other issues. I got really skinny and had temper problems. I was having sweaty problems and tachycardia, all that. You would read off a bunch of different symptoms, and it is pretty similar between hyper and hypo. There are some similarities. But I discovered through blood tests that I had autoimmune hyperthyroidism, which is Graves' disease. And the first question my doctor asked me was, had you been exposed to radiation lately? I'm like, no. So I don't find out. Now, I went through all kinds of tests, and they did the looking for hot spot nodules, which would be cancerous. I drank an entire cup, and I guess from what I've looked at now, they don't do this anymore. But they made me drink this big gloppy cup full of radioactive iodine-131.
Yeah.
And then I had to sit and wait for an hour as it collected in my thyroid, and then lay for an hour on this table with this massive device over me that looked like an upside-down Hershey's Kiss as they were scanning my thyroid. So I'm sure that did wonders for me.
Uh-huh.
Wow, all I got's a zit on my eyebrow.
I heard. Yeah, it was pretty nuts. And so I discovered, I don't know, about a year and a half or so later, while I was searching for something completely different, I was in Google, and I was under Google Images, and I happened to see this map that was exactly where I'd been working for a year and a half, right during that time, that had this big red dot, and it was under the Superfund site, talking about the Manhattan Project and how the business right behind where I was working was right now, I think it's called Praxair. Before that, it was the Linde plant, and before that, it was Union Carbide, which is where they did a lot of the research for the Manhattan Project. And then the Army Corps of Engineers came in eventually to quote-unquote clean it up and took all that radioactive debris and sprinkled it across western New York in standard dumps. So now, like, right along the entire Niagara River, there's like the Ashland oil site and a couple others where they dumped this material or spilled it or whatever, and now it's this massive cesspool.
Oh, but it's supposed to be okay when you dilute it and spread it around.
Yeah, like all over, and I think maybe that was their MO. But the one thing that, is looking back in retrospect on all this, when I first started working there, I'd be outside having a smoke leaning against the building, and it was in like a semi-residential, so we had an office building, and then there were little side streets, and there were houses all down them. And then right kitty corner behind that was the Praxair FKA, Linde FKA Union Carbide facility. But in retrospect, I'm standing out there having a smoke, and I'm looking at these houses, and every single house had a 7-foot black, red, and white hand-painted sign with skulls and crossbones, and I don't know what they said, and I never questioned what those signs said.
Yeah, what city was this in?
Tonawanda, New York.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Hell.
Yeah, hell. It's right around the same area where Love Canal is. I mean, when I was growing up, there's the one place my mother told me to never go, was Tonawanda.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was so dirty. But I didn't.
And we all listen to what our mothers say.
Yeah, of course we do. So anyway, I ended up getting very ill for a long time after working there. And here's the best part. Do not let them tell you that the way to treat this. Now, you have hypo Hashimoto's, is correct?
Mm-hmm.
I thought I heard you say it cycled, but I don't remember it.
It does. It can be completely whacked out. It can go from low to high.
Because, that happened to me. Actually, I've gone up and down 3 times now. But I've stabilized with diet and exercise and making sure I take care of myself and get rid of all this, the bad foods, the junk foods, the GMO, the fast foods, anything in a box. And I have not had issues, knock on wood, since. I don't have to take medication anymore. But what they tried to convince me of is that the only way to cure this, because I had hyper, was to burn my entire thyroid out and then take replacement therapy for the rest of my life. And I said, look, dude, I'm going to tell you something. I am allergic to like all kinds of weird things. And also I don't have that issue anymore since I got rid of all the crazy food.
Yeah.
I had all these weird allergies to everything. So I really think that the autoimmune was just the next step to that. My body becoming allergic to itself. But they wanted to burn the entire thing out and give me replacement therapy. And I said, look, what if I'm allergic to that hormone? It's like pig or cow hormone that they give you as replacement.
Yeah.
And he says, well, you can't be because you'll die. I'm like, well, then that's not an option, because I can guarantee you that if there's one person on the planet that would have issues with something, it would be me. So my suggestion to him, and I had not read anything up on this was just using common sense, is why don't we like take my weight and take my blood numbers as to how over I am, and I'm sure there's an equation somewhere that you can come up with to figure out how much of my thyroid you need to take out to make me normal. And he said, you know what? I've been practicing for 30 years, and we've never done it that way, so I don't know what makes you think you're so special. That's what he said to me. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go find myself another doctor. And he said, yes, I think you should do that. I mean, seriously, this guy was trying to force me, and if I had been naive and listened to him, they would have burned my thyroid out and put me on pharmaceuticals for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So I went to my mother's doctor, it was her primary care, but who happened to be an endocrinologist by education. And do you know what she told me? She says, why is this guy giving you archaic therapies that they used to do 30 years ago? What we do is we take your weight and the amount that you're over, and we try to burn out just that much. Yeah, exactly what I had suggested, though I had no idea that that was what they actually did. So anyway, we decided to just watch it for a while, and it actually went away.
Yeah.
Until I got pregnant, and then it went the other direction. But it's gone away again.
Well, it's, I mean, it seems like such an insignificant organ and, in totality, but when there's something wrong with your thyroid, I mean, look at that list of symptoms. It really messes you up.
And it makes you crazy. Like, literally. You're
and I need that.
Yeah. So the lesson in this is how interesting it was that the first thing she asked me is if I'd been exposed to radiation. And then to find out after the fact that, yeah, I'd been sitting in the middle of a cesspool. Mm-hmm. So I would predict that there probably are a lot of cases going on right now. And here's the other thing. So since then, I spent 3 years going to the cancer hospital because I have like weird messed up blood numbers now. But I will tell you again, I've been able to keep those under control, again, with diet and exercise and getting rid of all the crazy garbage out of my diet.
Yeah, there were a couple other things that were really whacked out. My sodium was really high, and my potassium was really high, and then there was like bilirubin and stuff like that was really low. And he didn't even address this with me at all. And from what I read, it means it's an indicator that your kidney function is down and your liver function is down.
Yeah, you need to detox. Big time.
But I've been detoxing. That's the thing that's so frustrating.
Dandelion, and like milk thistle, stuff that is specifically for your liver. Lemon in some hot water in the morning. I'll give you a list. I had to do a liver detox big time. Because if those aren't detoxified, your body can't get rid of the other waste that's there. So that's like step one, actually, is to get those working properly. And when I was pregnant, again, pregnancy, it was like my body was allergic to being pregnant. Like I just had such weird problems. And my pregnancy from month 2 on, it almost killed me. I literally almost died. I spent 9 days in the hospital when I was giving birth, and then all of the ensuing complications after that. But the medication that they put me on for my blood pressure, there is one that is proven to be safe through 30 years of research and following pregnant mothers they were giving this to, that did not harm the baby. It did not cross that placental divide. And so that's what they put me on. But the reason why they don't use that anymore, only in case of necessity, is that it causes liver damage. So by the end, I was doing that where they start finding protein in your urine, and it means that your body and your liver is not working properly, and my whole body started to fill up with fluid. Like I just blew up with fluid. My ankles got to be like massive. My hands, it was horrible. I was going into liver failure, and it took me 6 years to come back from that whole ordeal to like get back to myself and get my body back and get my health back. But I had to do some major. And did you know the liver is the one organ that can actually regenerate itself?
Yeah.
Can fix that. And I use lots of turmeric too, Christina. Put it in everything and use it with pepper. When you use it with black pepper, it actually intensifies the effect.
I mix it into food, and I'm taking the pills now, too.
Yes, me too, and they are very important. My sister had a friend who was in stage 4 liver failure, and it was through years of drinking. He's in the music business, and they used to do martinis. And he went to India for 6 months. I mean, he needed a transplant or he was going to die. He went to India for 6 months and had some friends over there, and they put him through the Indian spice therapy or whatever it is that they do.
Yeah.
Tons of turmeric. He came back. His doctor said that there was no sign of any liver damage whatsoever.
Fasting can be really good for that, for your body to rid itself of a lot of those things too. I mean, I've had a ton of emails from people with like all this different, advice of what they've used or what they've tried. And I had a couple of messages from Any News, from some of the people on Any News of some like holistic doctors to get in touch with. So I'm going to be working on that, and maybe if I can get one of them to come on the show and tell us. I mean, the point of all this is it's a lot easier to avoid the rads than deal with the sickness afterward.
Right.
And, we just don't know, though, if we were exposed to too much, that's not even going to make a difference at this point. We just don't know. I mean, look at what's happened to those U.S. Navy sailors. Yeah. In the last couple of weeks, those stories have been all over the place, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. One of the stories that came out on Any News, this was posted December 31st. There was a study that was done. The almost entire ground level of Northern Hemisphere was covered in radioactive fission products after 3/11. There's some graphics included with this story. The study is called The Impact of Fukushima Radio Xenon Releases on the Worldwide XE-133 Background Must Be Investigated. And this was, the source is Pure and Applied Geophysics. And you take a look at the graphics. I mean, they're just horrendous. We were inundated. And if you weren't, maybe you were one of the lucky ones that was just in a pocket of clean air, or you were indoors a lot during that time, or you had HEPA filters running. We just don't know. And those sailors, they didn't know either. I co-hosted Wide Awake News with Charlie McGrath last night, where we talked about some of this stuff and everybody being sick and, the news about the sailors and their lawsuit against Japan. And I'll upload that show from last night later on today. And if you missed Tuesday's show, it was a good one. And it's also on YouTube. It's a bit of comic relief for the new year, although it is very graphic. And the point of that show was that life is just a ride, from the words of Bill Hicks. And we have so much news to cover. In fact, Kurt's going to start us out by playing a clip. And this was posted by the Associated Press yesterday. Lots of the news that we're going to be talking about today is going on in Alaska. And just listen to this.
It is a mystery from the depths of the ocean. During the past 30 years, the number of stellar sea lions in the Gulf of Alaska has dropped dramatically. 75% gone in the North Pacific, and no one seems to know why. Hazy may know, so the 15-year-old sea lion in British Columbia is wearing an array of scientific instruments.
The animals are used to having numerous different devices on the harnesses so that we can monitor different things from acceleration to depth to heart rate, various different things.
What kind of energy are sea lions like this one using to find food? And are they eating enough of it? Food here comes by the bucketful, anywhere from 8 to 33 pounds of it, just like in the wild.
Right now what we're doing is trying to look at the energetics of the animals when they're swimming, when they're putting out that energy from whether they're satiated or fasted.
What they are finding is not yet conclusive. Everything from overfishing to disease and ship strikes may be to blame.
We have animals that are completely trained, and yet they're doing things on a scale that the wild animals do. And so they're helping us bridge that gap to make these connections between the two groups of animals much clearer and easier for all of us to understand.
Wild animals as mobile researchers, helping scientists preserve their species. Lee Powell, The Associated Press.
But no mention of Fukushima. 75% drop in stellar seal population. Some of these stories that I've been reading recently about the tsunami debris and about what's going on in Alaska, I've seen a couple comments on there that people are still coming across the ringed seals with lesions and hair loss and red puffy eyes. And, you know, the original report from NOAA said there were about 100 seals, and then that was extended to walruses and to, what was the other? Polar bears. And still no follow-up from NOAA. I have emailed this guy numerous times. He said he was going to call me, and he hasn't followed up with any of that. And so I'm kind of lost in the matrix of David Kelly at NOAA until I track down who the actual David Kelly is that's in charge of this study. Because these results are long overdue. In fact, they were supposed to be in February of 2012. Another story that came out yesterday, just coincidentally, Japan sees largest population drop in more than a century. This was reported on AJW by the Ashi Shimbam. Japan sees largest population drop. It dropped from 127.47 million in 2012, marking the largest natural decline since statistics began in 1899, according to government estimates. The original story that was posted on, I think it was Bloomberg, said it was only from 1947 that they had been checking, but this is 1899, which goes along more with what Lauren Murray has said when she went back and did tests on the cause of death for the last century in Japan, because they have records that go back that far. The natural population decline, which is calculated by deducting the number of births from the number of deaths, hit a record 212,000 for 2012. It was down 18,000 from the previous year, and the birth rate in the U.S. is down too, and of course that can be attributed to economic reasons for sure. But I thought it was interesting that the seal story and Japan's population story came out on the same day. Now, another problem that is going on in Alaska is this grounded drill rig called the Kulak. Stormy weather, while less than what it was, is battering the rig that was grounded on Monday night, will persist through the night into tomorrow as another low moves into the northern Gulf of Alaska. While still a miserable day on the southeastern shores of the Kodiak archipelago, the decrease in wind and sea state will alleviate much of the concern of a hull breach and possible spill from the rig. This rig is carrying 143,000 gallons of low-sulfur fuel on board, as well as 12,000 gallons of lube and hydraulic oils. And it ran aground in the last couple of days because of bad weather. And there has been a lot of talk about drilling in this area because of the weather, because the conditions are so harsh, but they decided that the benefit was worth the risks. Apparently they weren't. Now that this has happened, the scenario in the Gulf of Alaska began to play out on Thursday when the tow line to a rig parted with the tug that was attempting to regain control of it. During the reattachment attempt, the tug was laying into the trough of the waves and took at least one broadside hit from the sea and reeled over to at least 50 degrees. Mariners say that this could be an extreme roll that could have contributed to the loss of engine power to the sea spray, and the sea spray would have likely entered the stacks. The Unified Commander, however, claims bad fuel is the reasons for the engine failure. Whatever happened, now we have this rig that's grounded. In fact, there's a picture with this article. This appeared in the Alaska Native News yesterday. So I'll post that link into chat for you guys. And some other news from Alaska. This was on a radio show. New nuclear reactor to be buried 100 feet under the permafrost in the middle of Alaska. This came from the Radio EcoShock show. Toshiba is very interested in and has been in talks with the mayor of Galena, Alaska, to build what they call a 4S Toshiba, a liquid sodium reactor that they propose to bury under the permafrost 100 feet underneath on the Yukon River floodplain. So the last of the pristine rivers in the world, there's been negotiations and machinations to put a liquid sodium reactor under this permafrost on the floodplain there in the middle of Alaska. Maybe they'll put it right next to the HARP facility. Tsunami debris, materials floating to North America from Japan could well be radioactive. There is no monitoring going on. And I had posted a video about this last December, about contamination of the beaches, and anyone who listens to the show knows that it's going to be epic. Tom Hartman, the host, said, "What about this nuclear waste that's headed for the United States? Almost a year ago, it seems you were telling us about it hitting the west coast of the United States. Is this a second wave? What is going on?" Kevin Camps from Beyond Nuclear says it'll be continual for a long time into the future. There's surface, flotsam, and jetsam, the floating materials, which if you read the mainstream media the past couple days, there's discounting that, oh, it's not radioactive, but there's no way to know that. It could well be radioactive. So for experts to say what is going to be hitting the west coast of North America is not radioactive, there's no radiation monitoring going on. So you can't really say that. We'll see. Lots of other news from around the world. In fact, I don't have this story up, but Iran is evacuating a city of 1.5 million people because of severe environmental pollution, is what it's calling that, but it just happens to be near a uranium processing facility that various news stories have suspected is leaking since November. There were a number of workers that had to be hospitalized from this facility in November, and Iran's government came out and said, there's no leak, everything's fine. Well, now they're evacuating an entire city of 1.5 million people. So it's got to be some pretty significant pollution for them to be doing that. And the other world's worst nuclear disaster containing Chernobyl, the mission to defuse the world's worst nuclear disaster site. This was posted on Wired UK by Andrew Hankinson today. This article was taken from the December 2012 issue of Wired magazine. A pretty small town 50 kilometers from Chernobyl in Ukraine, its tidy apartment blocks, restaurants, and bars were built after 1986 to accommodate those forced to leave homes that were within the 30-kilometer exclusion zone created after Chernobyl nuclear power plant's reactor 4 exploded. This is where Lauren Dodd, 65, is picked up from his cottage every morning and driven to the site of the disaster. His journey takes him through the exclusion zone and a barrier at a checkpoint 10 kilometers from the former power plant. Dodd, a U.S. citizen, sits in the back reading the Wall Street Journal and checking email on his iPad. After the explosion 26 years ago, helicopter pilots dumped thousands of tons of sand to smother the fire, which burned for 2 weeks. Soldiers gathered radioactive rubble using wheelbarrows and shovels and tipped it into the smoldering heap. Then the construction crews arrived. From May to November, they built a containment structure called the sarcophagus over the reactor's remains, but in their haste to finish, the contractors didn't seal it properly. The sarcophagus is failing. A 2006 report by the Chernobyl Forum, a group of UN agencies, described it as having been hastily built in horrendous conditions, leading to imperfections. It is supported by the remains of Reactor 4, the structural stability of which is unknown. It's kind of funny that it's Reactor 4, too. And its own structure has corroded over time. The same report summarized that the main potential hazard of the shelter is a possible collapse that would mean another release of radioactive material into the environment. Dodd is in the Ukraine to prevent this. As the managing director of the 220-person project management unit, he's responsible for building a new shelter over the top of the sarcophagus called the New Safe Confinement, or NSC. The building, which will rise from one of the most treacherous construction sites on Earth, will be 108 meters tall and 150 meters wide, have an arc span of 257 meters, and will weigh 29,000 tons. Unlike the hastily constructed sarcophagus, it is designed to last 100 years. The construction site is a concrete pad 180 meters west of the reactor, and once finished, the NSC will be slid into place and properly sealed. Remote-controlled cranes suspended from its roof will then dismantle the sarcophagus, and robots will remove all remaining radioactive material, even though they haven't been able to do any of that in 25 years. The project is due to be finished by 2015, but every day the chances of the sarcophagus's collapse increase. That's the schedule, Dad says. There are always hurdles, there are always surprises. Whenever we dig here, we run into stuff, old cranes, caterpillars, or pieces of nuclear fuel, and many of the things we have done have never been done before. So when you do something for the first time, He trails off. Steel erection began in April this year. The central section of the ark has already been completed and now sits on the concrete pad, which is slightly wider and longer than the NSC. The remaining pieces are laid on the floor like unpacked Legos, with huge cranes looming over it. To the east is the sarcophagus. Behind it are a long turbine hall and 3 other reactors, all defunct. Dodd, who is on site by 8 a.m. every day, is employed by U.S. construction giant Bechtel, which won the project management contract with its partner, Batel, from the Ukrainian government. The client is the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which is owned by the Ukrainian government. Dodd attends a conference every morning, along with around 20 other managers, and Igor Gromotkin, the plant's general director. After the meeting, his driver takes him to the PMU office, a 3-story gray block a few hundred yards from the sarcophagus. He gets out of the white SUV, walks inside the building, and stands on a machine that scans his hands and feet for radioactive particles. All employees must follow the same procedure when entering any building there. He gets the green light, a gate opens, and he walks up to his office. He was in Portland, Oregon, and after school he enlisted in the U.S. Army. He then studied engineering physics at Oregon State University. After completing a master's in nuclear engineering at the University of Washington, he worked at the Hanford nuclear site, which had made the plutonium for the atom bomb dropped on Nagasaki. In 1980, he took a job at Batel that involved analyzing Soviet nuclear reactors for the U.S. government. After the Chernobyl explosion in 1986, he compiled the official U.S. report, and in 1991 the USSR broke up, and nuclear engineers in the former bloc sought his help in improving safety at their neglected reactors. 3 years later, a Ukrainian MP invited him to see the site. They had workers going in there every day without respirators, and the lighting was almost non-existent. Dodd says conditions were horrible. Between 1995 and 1997, I went there a dozen times, and there were places where the roof was being held up by a beam that went across the top of a vertical element that had partially collapsed during the accident. Just one jolt, and it would have collapsed. If it falls down, it's going to release a lot of radioactive dust, and this will, depending upon wind speed and direction, cause a problem. The real physical problem would primarily be on site. By the time the dust reached the perimeter of the exclusion zone, calculations have shown it would exceed regulatory limits, but the psychological impact would probably be the greatest. Everyone in the country and surrounding countries would have a lot of concern. Well, I hope so. I'll drop this article into chat for you guys as well. Some other news from around the world. This is really interesting. There was a weapon of mass destruction that was tested in 1945 off of New Zealand. And this guy was doing research for a book. He's a filmmaker and a writer. And he posted this in the Telegraph, I believe it was yesterday. Tests were carried out in the waters around New Caledonia and Auckland during the Second World War and showed that a weapon was feasible with a series of 10 large offshore blasts that could potentially create a 33-foot tsunami capable of inundating a small city. He found this going through military records and doing research for a project. The top-secret operation, codenamed Project SEAL, tested the doomsday device as a possible rival to the nuclear bomb. About 3,700 bombs were exploded during the tests, first in New Caledonia and later at a peninsula near Auckland. The plans came to light during research by a New Zealand author and filmmaker, Ray Waru, who examined military files buried in the National Archives. Presumably, if the atom bomb had not worked as well as it did, we might have been tsunamiing people, said Mr. Waru. It was absolutely astonishing, first that anyone would come up with the idea of developing a weapon of mass destruction based on a tsunami, and also that New Zealand seems to have successfully developed it to the degree that it might have worked. The project was launched in June of 1944 after a U.S. naval officer, E.A. Gibson, noticed that blasting operations to clear coral reefs around the Pacific Islands sometimes produced a large wave, raising the possibility of creating a tsunami bomb. If you put it in a James Bond movie, it would have been viewed as fantasy, but it was the real thing, he said. I only came across it because they were still vetting a report, so it was sitting on someone's desk in the archives. 40 years after the joint testing, New Zealand faced a dramatic breakdown in its security ties with the U.S. after it banned the entry of nuclear-armed ships from entering its territory during the 1980s. The dispute led to the U.S. downgrading its relationship with New Zealand from an ally to a friend. In his new book, Secrets and Treasures, Mr. Waro reveals other unusual findings from the archives, including Defense Department records of thousands of UFO sightings by members of the public, military personnel, and commercial pilots. Very interesting that they were testing this all the way back in World War II. Fukushima Diary reported yesterday that Turkey is going to be conducting radiation tests on all of its imports from Japan as of January 1st of 2013, but it's going to be testing items imported retroactive to March of 2011. They state imports from Japan are suspected to be radioactively contaminated. So I'm glad somebody understands the problem. A lot of news about these sailors over the past week and a half, and this ran on CNN and Fox and a number of other media outlets. Fukushima fight back. U.S. Navy sailors say there was a conspiracy to withhold truth about radiation releases. Some of them have been interviewed on TV and said things like, I'm not what I used to be, my thyroid's not what it used to be since 3/11, I have degenerative discs all over my back, I was healthy before all of this. Now, it's my understanding so far there's only 8 sailors that have come forward as part of this lawsuit. It does include a 1-year-old child of one of the sailors who was born with birth defects. Some of the other problems that they have been suffering from are cancer and bleeding from the rectum as well. Any News also posted a video that I sent them from CNN that was just a few days after the reactors blew up, where it showed the sailors scrubbing the deck of the USS Ronald Reagan, and none of them were wearing masks or any kind of protection or hazmat gear or suits. And I put out a video a few days ago about this, and I actually looked up the PDF from the U.S. military, from the Navy for decontamination procedures. And there was a video that one of the sailors on the ship had posted too, called Radiation Scans. I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but it's on the video. I already put that in chat at the top of the hour. And take a look at it. As so far, it's had like 3,000 views. It really needs to be more widely seen. You can tell, I mean, there's no doubt about it that decontamination procedures or protocols were not followed on the ship, even though Geiger counters were going off like crazy on the guys' clothing, and they should have all stripped down. It should have been segregated into males and females. Everything should have been draped and taped off, and they should have showered and then been checked and triaged and sent to appropriate health facilities as necessary, but none of that was being done. It was kind of just a giant like free-for-all in this room on the ship. And while some of the guys are checking with Geigers, there's like big piles of clothes in the middle of the room, and there's piles over here and there, and they're throwing stuff around, and one guy's like flicking a vest at the person who's filming. And they're joking around that, oh, we're probably all going to die and stuff like that. And some people were kind of like taken aback by that. But, you know, the thing is, these guys weren't told how bad this situation was. So, I mean, they kind of knew it could be bad, but not to a point, you know, where they took it really maybe as serious as they should, because the people in charge weren't taking it serious. I mean, letting them go out and scrub down the decks, which they know have been contaminated with MOX fuel, without any masks or protection, it's horrendous. Kyoto reported the U.S. government sent a special team to counter nuclear terrorism to Fukushima after 3/11. Radiation data was known by officials early on. This was posted December 31st of 2012. So there's no excuse for the Navy to not take proper precautions. And another report that was posted on Any News January 2nd, an official was told to evacuate at least 100 kilometers after March 11th because they knew Fukushima Daiichi was going to explode. This comes from an NHK documentary. This was uploaded by Missing Sky 101 from YouTube. This was from a city official. They came in from the lobby over there. Self-defense force personnel running and shouting, the nuclear plant will explode. Evacuate to at least 100 kilometers. They were shouting in loud voices and rushing all around. Outside, a steady stream of self-defense forces vehicles were already heading out of town. Seeing them evacuate made me realize that this was serious. This was before the reactors exploded, and they still allowed this Navy ship to be offshore. It's really frustrating to keep reading this kind of stuff, and more of this is going to come to light. And like I talked about on Charlie's show last night, and this applies not only to the Navy sailors, but to North America and Canada, the U.S., Mexico, the entire Northern Hemisphere. Anytime that there is a possibility that you are contaminated with nuclear fallout or exposed to nuclear fallout, and especially without the proper instruments to be able to check, you assume worst case scenario. And the reason is because the effects of on health will be so detrimental. And if you mitigate for that, if you assume the worst and you take the steps to reduce your exposure, you haven't lost anything. But you have a lot to lose if you didn't take those steps. And it was true. And once in a while, we come across someone who really expresses themselves well. And, you know, a lot of us have a lot of feelings and frustration about this issue. And a couple weeks ago, Stephen Moyer, who we've had on this show, he runs a couple of different pages on Facebook. Radiation Health Solutions and Synergy Nation are two that I know of. He did kind of like a very casual, like heartfelt speech, and he had it listed as private. And he just shared it with some of us, and I was like, you got to make this public. This is so good. I mean, this really says a lot of what many of us are thinking. And because it's so good, I wanted to play it in its entirety. It's called Throw the Morons Out by Stephen Moyer.
Yeah, the Nodes Network is a service organization to the Synergy Nation. So you can kind of think about it as, the military-industrial complex is a service organization to the United States government, and the Nodes Network is a service organization to the Synergy Nation. There is some kind of an analogy there. We're based on peace and on virtue, and the United States is based on war and domination. So it needs a huge military to dominate the world, or at least it thinks it does. It actually doesn't need a huge military, but that's the rationale. It's like we have to be strong so that we can defeat any enemy. I mean, all this stuff is crazy, psychotic nonsense. Why don't we just call it what it is? Insanity. The military-industrial complex and the government are insane. And we need to create an alternative, if for no other reason than to show people what it would look like if we had good government. What would good government be doing? Well, it would be identifying what needs to be done, like with the climate and the environment and the economy and education and the health and welfare of the people. It would be identifying what needs to be done in all of these areas, and it would be taking responsibility to see to it that it got done. Not forcing it to get done with a gun. That's not a good idea. Come on, people. Wake up. Tell the truth. Violence is a bad solution. In fact, it's not even a solution. It's the problem. The idea that we have to govern our world, that we have to manage the earth with violence is insanity. It's total insanity. 100%. And we should stop voting for the people who think it's a good idea to beef up the military. Get them out of government. Don't vote for them. If they think we need a big military, get them out. I want them out on the street, unemployed. Don't you dare vote for them. And then say, I'm doing the right thing. No, you're not. You're evil and you're supporting evil. Tell the truth. What we're doing in the world, the United States of America, is evil. We're bombing Pakistanis as they have dinner with drones. Look it up. Become aware. We're bombing Pakistanis at dinner. Come on. This is not righteous. It's evil. That's the only word for it. The United States is the evil empire, and it needs to end. Now, the obvious question is, what are you going to replace it with? Because there are real needs in the world. Things do need to get done. And one of the top priorities is the environment. We haven't talked about Fukushima as a nation, but it's the worst environmental disaster in human history. This stuff coming out of Fukushima, Japan, the nuclear reactors that blew up, melted down, this stuff is going to be around for 500,000 years. Killing people, mutating the genome. This is terrible. And the United States government doesn't have anything to say about it. Just about nothing. Maybe a little bit, but just about nothing. Oh, well, we don't have, it's not our problem. We'll let Japan take care of it. Please, get these people out of the government and put people in there who understand what's going on and care about the earth and care about humanity and care about righteousness. What is righteous? You don't go and say, I'm righteous because I'm looking the other way as the worst environmental disaster in human history unfolds in Japan, and I'm going to look the other way. I'm going to look over at Syria. Yes, Syria is a problem. But when you look at it, Japan is a much bigger problem. Fukushima. It's huge because it's going to go on and on and on. Syria is going to end. Yeah, there's going to be people who die. There already have been. Maybe a lot of people will die. But it will end. Probably very soon. Fukushima isn't going to end anytime in the foreseeable future. Anytime. It's not going to end in 10 years. It's not going to end in 20 years. It's not going to end in 50 years. Look into it. Do some research. It's the biggest disaster in human history. Not just the biggest environmental disaster. The biggest disaster in human history. Man-made disaster. I don't even think there's a earth-made disaster that comes close to Fukushima. Maybe there is, but I can't think of what it would be. It's the biggest disaster in history. I think that's the bottom line summary statement of Fukushima. It's the biggest disaster in history. And we're not talking about it. People are dying in Japan from radiation, from poisoning. So that GE stockholders could make money? So Westinghouse stockholders could make money? So that TEPCO stockholders could make money? This is insanity. It really is. We need better government. We need a better way of stewarding our world and taking care of the needs of humanity. People have real needs. And a lot of people's needs are not being met very well, if at all. People are starving, people are hungry, people are being denied health care when there is health care, when we have the means. Oh, I own that drug, you can't make that drug. Come on, put them out of business. Take care of the needs of humanity first, not the greed of humanity first. Take care of each other. Love thy neighbor. And in a world where we have a global internet and obviously a global environment, global business, global money, when you have all this globalism going on, everybody is your neighbor. Everybody. So love everybody on the whole planet, because it's the right thing to do. If you want to be righteous, if you want to do the right thing, take care of everyone on the planet. And that's what government should be about. It shouldn't be about my nation versus your nation. I'm right, you're wrong. Now we go to war and we kill each other and make money the old-fashioned way through the military-industrial complex. No, this is unacceptable. Stop it. Grow up already. Get the juvenile delinquents out of government and put the adults in charge. I'm an adult, and there are plenty more like me. Look for them, and you'll find them. Look for the adults in society, the mature individuals, the spiritually evolved individuals, and put them in positions of responsibility. Don't put the nutcases and the psychopaths and the money lovers in charge and think you're going to get good results. What was that Einstein said? Don't do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Well, what have we been doing? We've been electing the same money-loving politicians over and over again. And they're not talking about the environment. They're not talking about the future of humanity. They're not talking about health care of the people or the education of the people. Nah, they're talking about money for business. Get them the hell out of government here in the United States and everywhere else. Throw them out. That's the revolution. You have to stop voting for them. You have to stop supporting them. You have to stop acting like they're good people, and you have to call a spade a spade. They're evil people because they love money more than morality. They love power more than principle. And they love victory more than virtue. Throw them the hell out. I don't care what party they are. Practice some discernment. Figure it out. Does this politician love people more than power, or power more than people? Does this politician love morality more than money, or does he love money more than morality? Figure it out, and stop voting for them if they love money more than morality. Stop voting for them if they love power more than principle. And stop voting for them if they love victory more than virtue. Kick them out. And call them by their name. Evil. That's their name. Don't let people think they're good people by voting for evil people. You gotta stop voting for the evil people. And don't give me this crap, there's nobody else to vote for. There are people to vote for. And if there aren't, be one of them. Run yourself. But most important, call a spade a spade. If these people think military spending is a good idea, they're evil. It's not a good idea. We don't even need a military. We need people who are able to respond to a natural disaster like a hurricane or a tornado, or people who are able to respond to a man-made disaster like Fukushima or Chernobyl. We're not ready to do the things that need to be done. Where was the world response team for Fukushima? I didn't see one. Did you? They were all running around going, oh, it's not my fault. We'll let TEPCO take care of it. the Tokyo Electric Power Company. They're in charge. Oh, please. First thing they want to do is run away. True. Do your research. They wanted to run away from the broken reactors and say, oh, we're done. We made our money. Bye. It's your problem now. When the uranium fuel was in the reactors, it was TEPCO property. But when it blew up sky high and went throughout the world in the atmosphere and in the water and in the food, oh, it's not their property anymore. Come on. Property's a really ridiculous idea. It's an idea of control. It's not an idea of responsibility. TEPCO's not responsible for all the damage it's doing. There's no way they could be responsible. They're already bankrupt. The Japanese government bailed them out. They're bankrupt. They're finished. They went belly up. So, capitalism doesn't work. Money doesn't work. Government doesn't work. Our whole civilization doesn't work. If you study global warming and you look at it and you go, what the hell's going on here? You go, damn, this is much worse than I thought it was. You go, oh my God, we gotta do some big stuff. We don't have to just have a little tax on something. No, taxes aren't gonna solve global warming. You gotta think big. How about going to space? Get off the planet. There's an idea.
We have been nuked. Did you know that? Check out Nuked Radio on ucy.tv Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with RadChick and Jules. Stay safe, everyone.